Alright, here we go. I'm not sure if I can save this, so this is just a test. But I'd like to try to read out loud and record it. So I'm going to start here with Perloo the Bold. I read this book when I was a kid and I really enjoyed it. I can't remember exactly what it's about besides, rabbit people fighting off like wolf people or something. But I remember it was good. So it's just a kid's book, so it's not very long. I'm sure it's not very hard. But yeah, I guess I could stop and try to see if this is gonna work. But I kind of want to read just to see the vibe and see if I can do this and have it sound good. So here we go. There's praises for the book, and this is definitely a used book, but that's okay. Well, looks like there's 34 chapters, so it must be short and small and quick. But let's see. Okay, Perloo the Bold. Chapter 1, Perloo. Thickly falling snow, tossed and turned by wailing winds, filled the air with streaky blurs of white and gray. It was hard to see. It was hard to move. It was even hard to breathe. Despite the weather, a young female monomer by the name of Lucabara came hurtling down the eastern slope of Ratchich Mountain as fast as she could ski on her long, flat feet. In one paw, she carried a tall, sharply pointed pole known as a pike. As Lucabara sped down the mountainside, she paused now and again to look anxiously back, making sure she was not being followed. Only then did she continue on. I can't hear myself and do this, so I'm going to take these off. At the bottom of the Glintic Dell, she reached her destination, a mound of earth so deeply buried in snow it looked like the top half of a snowball. In haste, she searched for a smoke pipe, but when she found it, there was no sign of either smoke or heat. Increasingly anxious, she used her four-fingered paws to hurriedly wipe away the snow until she uncovered a small wooden door at the top of the mound. On the door, a name had been crudely written, Perloo. After checking once more to make certain she was not being observed, Lucabara banged on the door. Perloo, she called. If you're there, let me in. It's important. The call echoed down a long, dark, earthen tunnel until it reached the larger room of a two-room burrow. There, fast asleep on a bed of dry moss, dreaming of the daring deeds of ancient monomers, lay Perloo. Perloo was 3 hops high and 12 years new, just about the same as Lucabara. But while her ears were slender and pointed at the tips, his were wide and bulging. He had a broad face, a mouth with a poky lower lip, and a nose of delicate pink. Lucabara's nose was blue. As a female monomer, Lucabara had a hair tuft at the nape of her neck. Perloo, a male, had whiskers, much like a rabbit's but thicker, and quite scruffy. As for Perloo's unshod feet, they were just like Lucabara's, long as he was tall, very narrow, very flat. Like all monomers, Perloo's plump body was covered neck to ankle with short, rough, curly fur. In the thin, cold mountain air, the fur was not enough to keep warm. That was why monomers wore loose-fitting smocks, made of animal skins, fur side out. Perloo's smock had been made from beaver skin. While sleeping, he had tucked head, body, knobby knees, long feet, 2 stubby arms, and paws inside it. The only part of him exposed to the air was one of his jackrabbit-like ears. It stuck straight up and out of his smock, so as to catch any unusual sound, which is how he heard Lucabara's call. Oh, bird's teeth, Perloo muttered to himself as he rubbed his baggy eyes and scratched his unkempt whiskers. Who could possibly want me? Reluctantly, he pawed the neck string of his smock open. It allowed his head to pop out, thus freeing his nose to sniff. Though he tried to smell who might be calling, the scent proved too weak. Mumbling, "Brother," under his breath, Perloo groped in the dark until he found some flints beneath a pile of bark books. He struck a spark and lit a candle, which brought pale yellow light to the snug burrow room. "Perloo, are you there?" the call continued. "If you are, you must let me in." Never a fast mover, Perloo loosened the bottom string of his smock, lowered his flat feet down to the dirt floor, and stood upon his skinny legs. His ear tips brushed the ceiling where roots, like wandering fingers, dangled through the earth. Breathing sleepily of the musty air, Perloo grasped the burning candle and hopped up the tunnel to the burrow door, where a peephole allowed him to see who was outside. There were all kinds of animals on the mountain: goats, rabbits, coyotes, among others, but it was the bears, wolves, and mountain lions that concerned monomers. Of even greater danger were the fellbarts, the monomers' particular enemies. Though, as far as Perloo knew, there was peace between the tribes. Monomers considered fellbarts to be dangerous, always capable of deceit, which was why Perloo took the time to flip open the peephole and look outside. Only when he saw the twin tips of the monomer's ears did he realize the safety peg and release the safety peg and let the door drop down. There was Lucabara, smock covered with snow icicles hanging from her ears. "What took you so long?" she asked, giving Perloo a reproachful glare. "Were you reading?" Perloo blinked. "Do I know you?" he asked. "I'm Lucabara," she replied brusquely. "I live in the Central Tribe Burrow. Though we haven't met, I've heard a great deal about you." "You do? You have?" Perloo said, rubbing his paws nervously while wondering why this unfamiliar female was visiting. Lucabara gave a vigorous shake to rid herself of snow and ice, then hopped right down the doorway, set her pike against the wall, plucked the candle from Perloo's paws, and bound down his tunnel. A flustered Perloo pushed the door up against the wind and snow, then hastened to follow. When he caught up to his visitor, she was standing in the middle of his main room, holding his candle high, looking about with intense interest. Perloo's furnishings were quite ordinary: moss bed, low table, foot mat of woven grass. On one wall hung a picture of Magwat, the magpie, great teaching bird of the monomers. Magwat had a blue-black back, white breast, bright, beady eyes, a long tail, and a sharp black beak. Her head was cocked to one side as if ever ready to see, hear, and tell all. Monomers loved to quote her sayings. Except for the bed, where Perloo did most of his reading, the burrow was crowded with bark books. Against the earthen walls were shelves packed helter-skelter. All the books were about monomer, history, or mythology. Opposite the bed, a small stone-faced fireplace had been built into the earth. A lumpy clay pot, half full of water, hung from a stone hook, but the hearth, also stuffed with books, was cold. "What a mess," Lucabara proclaimed as she loosened the neck string of her smock. "It's just me," Perloo murmured apologetically. He was not accustomed to company. Can I get you some myrtle tea?" "I don't think we have time," Lucabara replied. Perloo, wondering what Lucabara could possibly mean, muttered, "There's always time for tea and honey." "If you hurry," she agreed, pushing some books off the mat and squatting down. Then she just stared at Perloo. Uncomfortable beneath her gaze, Perloo hurried into his storeroom. Being mid-cold cross, it was only half full of nuts, roots, and dried vegetables. As for a stock of honey, he suddenly remembered he'd used it up and never had replaced it. Nonetheless, he hopped back to the fireplace with myrtle sprig and cups in paw. Rather clumsily, he removed the books and struggled to light a fire. How deep is the snow? He asked, trying to make polite conversation. Maybe 7 hops since sunup, Lucabara replied, and still coming down. The worst snow was the great blizzard in the frog year, Perloo informed her. 12 hops in one sunglow, he said, using the monomer term for a 24-hour period. When Lucabara said nothing, Perloo, fearful that she thought he had been showing off his knowledge, hastened to add, at least that's what I read somewhere. The fire ablaze, Perloo set the water to boil. Soon the sweet scent of myrtle began to perfume the room. Lucabara lifted one of her long bare feet and rubbed it. Perloo, she said, why didn't you have a fire going? I was sleeping, he said. I thought all you did was read, she said. I was reading, Perloo admitted. A fine book, too. The Way of Monomer Heroes, but I fell asleep. Lucabara looked at him keenly. Perloo, she said, Magua taught us that a life without challenge is a life not lived. What about you? Do you like challenges? I don't think so, Perloo admitted. The very thought of challenges made him nervous. Why do you ask? Perloo, Lucabara said. Grantor Jolene is very ill. Oh my, Perloo exclaimed. Is that why you came, to tell me that? Yes. I'm awfully sorry to hear it, Perloo declared, so troubled he admittedly took a sip of tea he made for his guest. Did you know? He said. Though it's been a while, I've enjoyed talking to Jolene. She may be our leader, but she knows more monomer history than anyone else. More than all my books combined. Lucabara nodded solemnly, but gave no response. Perloo started to take another sip of tea, only to remember he had made it for Lucabara. He began to offer it to her, then realized it was too late. He had drunk from it. He put it down nervously and said, How ill is she? Lucabara said, It's probably fatal. Oh, dry dust, Perloo whispered. Very dry dust. He stared down at his bare feet. It's not for nothing that she's been called Jolene the Good, he murmured. Perloo, Lucabara said, pausing to take a deep breath before continuing. Jolene has been asking for you. Me? Perloo cried. When she woke this early, Lucabara explained. She asked to see you as soon as possible. That's why I came. But why should she want me? Perloo stammered in astonishment. His baggy eyes were open very wide now. Perloo, Lucabara said firmly. She told me to say that seeing you was a matter of life and death. And Perloo, she didn't mean her life and death. She was speaking of our entire monomer tribe. Ba-ba-bum. Chapter 1. And done. Okay, so about 13 minutes. Put these back on. So, now let's stop it. Stop the recording.